So I want to just lead with the idea that it seems like a lot of people tend to just generally skip right to no in almost any circumstance where there is a question about whether or not they should do something. And I think that becomes a knee-jerk impulse. And what I like to do is, instead of say no, to think maybe. Maybe we should do something rather than no. And that attitude is what led to pretty much every photograph you'll see tonight. But it has to start somewhere, has to start with a maybe rather than no. I wasn't born a photographer. I was actually born kind of a baseball player. And then through college, I wasn't like born a baseball player, but it seemed to be in me. Through college, I played baseball. And then I became an actor. And I did that for a while. And I realized in the midst of that I didn't have a passion for it. And I knew that there was a passion in there, but I didn't know what it was for. And one day I biked up to the top of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park. And I looked out over this vista, and I realized I had no idea how to take a photograph like this. You can see the bottom credit is actually Greg Hartford. If you're watching, awesome photo, Greg. I wanted to know how to take this picture. So on the way down the mountain, I decided to take a photography course, which I did at SVA here in New York City, and I took a black and white printing course. And the first photo I printed was of a neighbor of mine. And when that came up in the developer, I had this feeling, I don't know how many of you have experienced it, this rush, and I realized it was something I was meant to do, as cheesy as that sounds. And so I started carrying my Pentax K1000 around and shooting photographs of mainly actors. And in addition to giving me the inspiration, she also gave me a great word of advice, which was, she said to me, whenever you're doing something, you're not doing something else. And I took that to heart, and I realized, if you're playing a video game, if you're watching TV, even if you're sleeping, honestly, you're not achieving what you want, you're not spending time with people you care about. So I just obsessively started shooting. Eventually, I built a really good career as a portrait and headshot photographer in New York City, which I've done for many, many years. And in the midst of that, I was hired to photograph the portraits of a dancer from the Paul Taylor Dance Company. His name is Jeffrey Smith. Just portraits, but we were talking about dance a little bit. I had no idea, I'd never shot a dancer in my life. And then that night, I was watching my son play with his toy bus. He loves it when I show this. He's 11 now. If you're watching, I'm sorry, man, I had to, and you're not here. So I realized, he has this passion and enthusiasm for his fantasy world that we lose as we get older. We forget to appreciate the everyday moments in life. And I suddenly had this idea that if I could use dancers to enrich the everyday and show how beautiful the moment-to-moment existence of life could be, that would be something unique I hadn't seen before. And I think one of the keys when you're looking for projects to work on is, have you seen it before? If you haven't, it's really worth exploring. So I decided to explore it, and I asked Jeffrey if he could get me some of the dancers from Paul Taylor. Now, I didn't know anything about dance, so I didn't realize they were one of the top dance companies in the world, but they were, and somehow he convinced several of them to explore this idea with me, though I had no idea what I was doing. And the first day I met, and I took this photograph. Now, you got to think, when you see something like this, you realize there is incredible potential in this idea. Just look at what he can do with his body and the beauty of it and the strength and agility. And it really I was drawn to it also because I was an athlete, and it was very athletic and strong. So I really wanted to start exploring this idea. But of course, like any idea, you're not good at it right away. And I've done a lot of presentations, but last night, last night, I was working on this. And I looked back on the early pictures from Paul Taylor. I realized, wow, there were a lot of failures in there. And I wanted to show you a few of those, because I think it's very important to understand that when you come up with an idea, it doesn't mean that you're going to nail it right away, but you have to push through, and you have to keep exploring until you find your voice in that idea. And so one of the first shots I took after that was this one. Notice they're all wearing black. I had no idea, should they be in leotards? Well, I didn't know that his foot should be connected to his leg. I just didn't know what I was doing. And these were the best. These were in the folder labeled Paul Taylor Best. So this is what I had going. And then, this is just a disaster. He's wearing black. There's black behind him. The pigeon is out of focus. And I started showing these around. I showed them to a friend of mine, a photographer, Jeremy Salatiga. And he said, "You're calling this Dancers Among Us. Well, where's the Among Us? These are all long lens shots. They're blurred out. You got to get some life. You got to really show what everyday life is." And I called Jeffrey. I said, "I want another chance at this. I want to try again. Just bring a suit. I'm going to bring a 28mm lens. Let's go in the subway and see what happens. And we took this photo. Now, when I took that shot, I realized, okay, this is the voice. This is what I'm really trying to do. And I spent about 2 months photographing the Paul Taylor dancers, and it got progressively better and better, and the shots were really resonating with me. And eventually, I contacted the Paul Taylor Dance Company, and I said, okay, I've been doing this for about 2 months with your dancers, and these photographs are now yours, which was just an awful, terrible idea, to just give all of your photographs away, but that's what I said. And the company director called me in for a big meeting. He's like, wow, it's like, yeah, I don't want anything. Maybe you'll have an exhibition at your shows. Maybe you'll make a little coffee table book, but they're yours to keep. I don't want anything to do with them anymore. I'm done with this project. And the singular worst decision I've probably ever made in my life. They said, thank you very much. We'd love to. And then they showed them to Paul Taylor himself. And he said, no, thank you. And the reason he said no thank you is because they were not of his dances. They were of his dancers, which I completely respect and understand. But that was the entire point of why I was doing it. So now I thought, well, I guess I'm done. Now, in the midst of this process with the dancers of Paul Taylor, I had seen this photograph by Richard Avedon, which was actually inspired by an earlier photograph that he had seen of this woman, who I don't know the photographer. And then I used that as inspiration to take that photo. And then that sat online, nobody was noticing, and one day PDN Online featured it as their photo of the day, and it went viral. And all of a sudden, people were calling me, magazines and newspapers, they want to know, what's this new project? And it got featured in the New York Daily News, and fortunately, probably the only literary agent that reads the Daily News happened to see it that day. And he called me, it happened to be a very good one, and he said, I think there's a book in this. So why don't we start pitching it to publishers? Now, he had a lot of pull, so he could get me in the door with publishers. Nobody knew who I was. Dance photography was not a thing. Instagram was not a thing. So he called me, we went around the publishers, and he would say to them, I'm going to bring somebody in. You need to see these pictures. There's going to be 25 prints, and you just have to see them. So I would show up with 11 by 14 prints, and we would sit down with the publishers, and in every case, this was the reaction. They would say, oh my God, these are unbelievable. I've never seen this before. 2 people cried. There was going to be an absolute bidding war for this book, no doubt, until they all showed them to the sales departments of their publishing house. And every sales department said, no way, it'll never sell. It's dancers, and they're all in New York City, and who's going to care? It'll never sell. So it was dead, once again, except months later, one junior editor at Workman had seen it online and hung a couple of these photographs in her cubicle to inspire her and to make her happy. And every time the creative director would walk by, she'd say, we should really meet this guy. And they'd say, dance photography, New York City, who's going to care? And they didn't. But she persevered and persevered until they agreed to meet me to discuss a calendar. And at that moment, when I was in the office, I pitched a book. And once again, they said, these are beautiful photographs, but they're all set in New York City, and they're dance, and we just don't think that there's a market outside of New York for this. And I said, oh, that's okay, because actually this summer, I'm going to travel all around the country shooting dancers, which was a complete lie. I only said that because I didn't want to hear no again. So they said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. So then I actually had to travel around the country. So I started booking plane tickets, and the first shot I took was this one. And when I took that, I realized, oh, wow, getting outside the city really makes sense. And they said, oh, wow, getting outside the city really makes sense. So I spent a year shooting it. They gave me a contract. And throughout the time when I would be traveling around, I would get emails from photographers who would hear I was going to Chicago or LA, and they'd say, can I come join you and watch the process? Because at this point, it was starting to build some steam online on Facebook. People were following it. It was getting more and more popular. So I would just be able to post, I'm going to a certain city, and then dancers would send me emails and say, here's my pictures, can I join the fun? And they would just come volunteer. Sometimes they would drive for miles or hours or get on a plane or whatever, and we would have all these amazing experiences and adventures, which I'm going to tell you all about. But first, I would always ask the photographers, could you please bring a camera and film the process? And then we compiled that, and this is what my travels around the country look like.
Always a little nervous at first because you never know what to expect with Jordan. I may be flying through traffic or diving past a moving train. You never know what it's going to be.
And that eventually became Dancers Among Us, which then became a bestseller. And eventually I did go back to Cadillac Mountain, and I took my own version of the horizon photo. Now, the beautiful thing about all this is years later, meaning this summer, Paul Taylor, who had said no thank you to everything, understandably, Paul, totally get it, now had to hire me to shoot their campaign. And I don't know how many of you here live in New York, but if you do, you probably saw these photographs on buses and at Lincoln Center and everywhere around the city very recently when they had their run. It was an incredible adventure. I'll tell you that the way this happened is, once again, two things about my work. I don't use any Photoshop other than color correction. So everything that you see is genuine. She really jumped that high on that rock. And also, because of that, I never plan things out. My mind doesn't work like Gregory Crutzen, where I can think about a huge production and then make it happen. Instead, I need to be in the moment figuring it out. So I just ask people to show up. Now, we're going to do a huge campaign for Paul Taylor. All 16 of their dancers have to be photographed, and they wanted to do iconic locations around New York City, and they wanted a plan, and they knew well enough that I couldn't provide a plan. So the best we could do is pick locations. So we would pick Brooklyn Bridge or Staten Island Ferry, and then we would all show up and we would figure it out. But they came with a huge crew of people and mats and trampolines. I don't use any of that stuff. And we had a video set up and everything. And in the end, it really worked out. And the spontaneity of that process really helped the images, I think. It was a very magical 3 days, and it would be like we would start at 4 a.m. and end at midnight, and one day we started at 9 p.m. and ended at 7 a.m. And it was exhausting to get them all in there. But each dancer approached it with enthusiasm, and I was having a great time. And this is my favorite quote. Leap and the net will appear. And the reason I love this so much is because it really, I think it's a great guide for life. It tells you, so many times I think what we try to do is we try to predict in advance what the next step is going to be. If I take this step, the next thing that's going to happen is this. And so if I can't anticipate the next one, well, then why take the first one? The opposite is true. When you don't know what's going to happen, that's when you take the step. And that is everything about what I do. So I'm going to tell you a few behind-the-scenes stories now about some photographs I took and how everything was serendipitous and spontaneous, and how it just all came together because of the very reason that we had no idea what we were going to do. And then it leads to this energy, enthusiasm, and excitement that's really thrilling that you just saw in that video, and then I'm going to tell you about now. I'm going to lead with probably the most difficult photograph I've ever had to take, which is this. So that's 5 guys levitating, donating to the Salvation Army. And there is no Photoshop in that. So that really happened, and here's how it happened. I was being documented by RTL German TV, and they wanted to see a day in my process. So I said, well, my process is spontaneous, so then that's how we're going to have to do it. And as I was walking to meet these guys, I had selected the Rockefeller Center area simply because there would be a lot of people there and a lot of options for stories, and it was the holidays. And as I was going to meet them, I saw the ribbon on the Cartier building and thought, okay, well, there's our location. Now what? And then I turned the corner to go get them, and I saw the Salvation Army guy about 3 blocks away. And I said, now, if a little money ends up in your pocket and a bunch ends up in the bucket, can I put you in this spot for about 15 minutes? And he said, sure. It turned out to be about an hour and a half, which is probably why he looks a little bit confused at that moment. Like, am I really supposed to just keep doing this? And I asked these guys, all right, now what can you guys all do that looks like you're in line donating to the Salvation Army? And they all did this move, which I am going to now demonstrate for you. So they would lay on their stomach, right? And they would have the money in the right hand, and they couldn't drop the money because it's my dollar. So they had to hold on to it, which meant that then they had to land on their left hand only. So they would hold with both hands, and then they would do this insane push-up thing, which goes something like this. And if I can't get up, then we're done for the day. Not bad, right? Like, not bad. I did this speaking tour in South Korea where I had to give 1 or 2 talks a day, and that was for 2 weeks. So I did that about 14 times, but there would be crowds of a lot of people, and the adrenaline is going, and I wanted to get really high, and by the time I got back on the plane, I literally couldn't sit down. I had thrown my back out so badly. So, of course, that, there are so many problems with this. There's so many tricks, and so it's so difficult to get something like that because, of course, look, it's Rockefeller Center in the middle of the day during the holidays, and there's nobody around, and there's no cars, and that just doesn't happen. So I'll show you a bunch of the times it didn't work out. Right? Or that. That was the worst. Like I'm like 1, 2, 3, and as I say go, I see their cross. I'm like, no, don't go. And then they went, and of course, we got the legs. And you know, what's that? It's funny, sure, but it's not like, oh my God, it's just funny. You know, you could retouch them out probably easily, actually, but I don't. So we just had to keep going. There would be not only the cab, but often what would happen is one of the guys, and not always the same guy, would be too low. So we would get 4 out of 5, we're nailing it, and then one guy misses it. Or somebody walks in the frame. Or we're getting really, really close, but their legs are down, and one of the guys, the foot in the back, is blocking the other guy's face. Or so close, but the hands are giving it away. And then finally, after like 55 times, we got the shot. And the producer actually came up to me and said, you have to stop. This is crazy. I mean, there was a huge crowd of people around watching this, but of course after they do one, they'd all want to go on their way, so then there'd be all these people passing by. I was pressed up against this building, and the security guard in the building kept saying to me, you got to get out of here, man. I mean, you're blocking the way. So over and over, and then finally I went up and gave notes. I didn't even know if I had gotten it yet, and there was a little blood on the pavement. And I looked up, I said, what's going on? And this dude, the guy in the green, he held out his hand, it was bleeding. And he said, I'm okay, I can keep going. That's how crazy and awesome dancers are. But of course they were filming my reaction, so I couldn't say, let's go on. I had to say, all right, I guess we're done. So we're done, thank you very much. And we fortunately got that shot. Here's another story. Now here, this is under the crazy things and not get arrested, because of course there's a lot of illegal things about this. This is in Fort Tryon Park. There's police constantly going around there. You're not allowed to climb the tree. You're definitely not allowed to hang silk from a tree, and you're not allowed to hang upside down from that silk you're not allowed to put on the tree. So we had to figure out like how to do this quickly. I was driving around Fort Tryon Park. The backstory here is this woman, Sarah, had recently gotten engaged, and I saw a post about that on Instagram, and I reached out to her. I said, I would love to do an aerial engagement photo with your fiance. That's all I know. Can you bring your silk and let's figure it out? We have a couple of hours to drive around. So we saw this tree with the bridge in the background. It's just, man, if we could possibly do that, but how do we even get the silk up there? To which she said, oh, no problem, I'll get up there. She just climbed up the tree and she started hanging the silk. Now at this point we're on the clock, right? Because now she's up there and the silk is hanging down and the police are driving by. And so she hangs the silk and then she hangs it straight down. And then she has to climb down. Okay. But now, she can't just hit the position because it's also kind of windy, and the silk spins around and she spins around on the thing. So now we're hoping for her to hit just the right moment. So this is what happens when there was no wind and she couldn't get in the right position. This is when she's getting spun around out of control. And then here, finally, and it's been going on for a while, she gets it, and it's almost right. If you could just get your foot a little closer to your head. No, that's too much. You're smushing your ponytail. Just a little further away. I'm screaming, just a little further away. And I'm screaming at him, just hold the box. I need it in the blue of the bridge so I can see it. Hold it up, hold it, ah! And then finally she hits it just right. Just right. And it was like, yay, that's incredible. Celebrate. And this is the way aerialists celebrate. Now, there's this young woman named Michaela DePrince, and I don't know how many of you know her, but she is a really incredible, spectacular woman. Her story is that she was born in Sierra Leone, and her family was killed in the Civil War, and she was adopted by a family in Philadelphia, and she only had one thing that she brought with her to the States, and it was a photograph of a ballerina. And she always wanted to be one, but she was always told she couldn't be. Because first of all, she's black, and second of all, she has skin discoloration. And so there's this movie that's called First Position, which documents her journey as well as several other young dancers. And it is just so remarkable that you have to watch it. And what she accomplishes in that movie and in the competition and everything is really incredible. She then became a really world-class ballerina. Right now she dances with the Dance Theater of the Netherlands. and she celebrates. She wrote a memoir called Taking Flight, and there's a movie being made about her. And in the midst of all this, I got to photograph her at Jacob's Pillow. I don't know how many of you know that, but that's the dance festival in Massachusetts. I didn't have much time to photograph her, but as I was driving to pick her up, I saw this really beautiful winding road. And so I sent her a text. I said, can you please grab a backpack if you have one? I think the story I want to tell is that you're kind of hitchhiking across the country. So she said, sure. She brings it out. And then we get to the road and we start trying to do stuff. And here's our first attempt. And I said, what I want it to look like is that you're just sitting in the air waiting for somebody to pick you up. And so she did this a bunch of times. And we started thinking, okay, this is good. I mean, I'm not like, my heart's not racing. It's not unbelievable, but it's good. And we're trying to figure out something. And at some point, after like 40 or so jumps, a car drives by and tries to get past us. And a dog sticks its face out of the window. And this dog was so beautiful that I chased the car down to get the dog. And I got the dog out and I said, can we please use your dog? I said like for 10 minutes. It was like 2 hours of this. Can we please use your dog just so I can get a photograph with the dog there as well? And it turns out this is like central casting dog. Okay. So now we really have something kind of special going on here. And we're trying to get this. Of course, what I want is I want them both looking straight ahead. Once again, with Photoshop, very easy to take one shot of the dog and then say, thank you, he goes, and then we get the shot of her and we composite them, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get it in the camera. So we kept trying. She did this another 50 times, and now she's into at least 100 jumps. 100 jumps. And then she finally says to me, can I try something else? And she tried something new, and after about 50 of those, the dog finally looked straight ahead. And we got maybe my favorite picture ever. It hangs in my studio, and it really is just kind of a representation of what, like, if you keep pushing and you're never satisfied, you keep trying. And also, if you have just incredible people to work with, then things like this happen. Now, Michaela then, when I started working on Dancers After Dark, she reached out to me at some point, and she said, well, we should shoot Dancers After Dark. And I was shocked. I mean, you know, the thing with the Dance After Dark is they're nudes in public, and I never thought that she would want to do it because, you know, there's a movie being made, she's already famous, why would she want to? She participated in the project to show other little black ballerinas that they're beautiful and they're special and they should celebrate their bodies and they should know that they're great. So I will show you a little bit, that these are okay to see, of one evening of shooting, just to give you an idea of how this would go. I met about 4 dancers in Penn Station. The only reason it was Penn Station is I had seen a Knicks game and it was right there. So that was the extent of it. And I'm showing them some photos here. This is the kind of stuff we've been working on, and I'm hoping to do something like that. And then I just turned around and I saw that famous Penn Station board, which doesn't exist anymore. Do you know that? It's so heartbreaking. Why? That's a whole nother topic, but why? So I see it, I was like, okay, well, this is absolutely nuts, but at this point, I'm now addicted to the nuts part of this process. And I thought, well, you remember, we have to rehearse, and then you have to hide, and then you have to run, and then breathe, and then get out of there. And so that's what I suggested to one of the dancers. Would you be willing to do this right here? And one of them said, yes, I would. And so then the others started saying, this is your pose, and we practiced it, this, that, and the other. And then at the end, of course, she was very excited that she had done it. Now then I wanted to review the pictures, so I sat down on the ground, and I'm starting to look through, and then I look at this hulking security guard standing at me and said, excuse me, sir. It's like, oh man, finally this is gonna happen. Like, I've made it for 2 years without getting busted, and here it is. He said, you can't sit on the floor. It's like, okay, I can't, you're right, I'm so sorry. And he didn't look at what I was looking at on the screen. So then we got out of there, and now we're like, everybody wants a piece of this, okay? So then, well, we're not that far from Times Square. I need a Times Square shot. Let's go to Times Square. We go to Times Square. We pick the next dancer, and she starts to warm up. And so you can see it's already drawing attention. And this would happen a lot with Dancers After Dark. It would be like, before we even did anything, crowds would start to gather because there are beautiful people wearing a sports bra and shorts and doing really cool things. Even if they're posing completely clothed for the practice part, They knew something was up. So like it'd be 3:30 in Stockholm, and a bunch of dudes would be like, "What are you doing?" They could just smell it. So Alan Cumming, and I had photographed him several years prior to this, and briefly, and then I reached out and asked him for a blurb for Dancers Among Us, which he gave me, and then years passed, but I had given him a print of one of the pictures of Dancers Among Us as a thank you, which hangs in his home in Edinburgh, so he knew about me, and that was the extent of it. Reached out to his assistant when he was performing Cabaret a couple of years ago and said, "Can I please come to the show?" And he said, "Sure, you can be Alan's guest backstage after." So I went backstage, and I thought it would be a quick, "Hi, I'm Jordan, thank you so much, it was a great show," but instead they ushered me up to his dressing room. And there were about 20 or so people in his dressing room, and there was this big sign there that said Club Cumming. And it turns out, and this was written about in the New York Times, that Club Cumming was an event that almost every night after his show, Alan would host people from New York City, you know, the Fast and the Fabulous crew, and it was fully stocked bar by Campari, and he would just entertain. And in the midst of this, I got up the courage and I said, "Thank you for the blurb for Dancers Among Us. This time I want you to be in my next book." And he said, "Sure." I said, "Okay, I should probably show you a photo." And I showed him a photo, and he said, "Naked, in public. Sure, let's drink." And that was the extent of our conversation about it. And then I spent 6 months emailing his assistant, Jimmy, back and forth, trying to figure it out. And finally, I got the okay that he said, "You can do it tomorrow night after his show at the Carlisle Hotel." He was performing a solo show on Tuesday night. That Sunday night, he had hosted the Tonys. So his assistant said, "So he's going to be tired. Go to his home on the Lower East Side, and you'll get maybe 30 minutes with him. Make sure it's not too public." And I said, "Sure." So for the only time in my life, I scouted. I got there 3 hours early. I walked all around. I had my shot ready. It was okay. It didn't matter. He was going in the book, whatever the shot was. And then at 11 p.m., I got a text from Alan. "Jordan, is this you? Can you please come to the Carlisle? I'm so sorry. Friends are here. I can't leave." So now, no plan. But I kind of like that there's no plan. I showed up at midnight, and as I was walking in, I saw Carlisle Hotel with the revolving door. I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then I got into his suite. He has a suite, as we all know. When you do a show at the Carlisle Hotel, you get a suite, right? So he's in the suite. Of course, there's a stock bar, and there are beautiful band members and people. Everybody's cool. He hands me a drink. Everybody's great. And we're trying to figure out the shot. And he says, "So Jordan, what do you want me to do?" I said, "Well, what is that famous pose from Cabaret?" And he did that. I was like, he went like this. This? I said, "Okay, first of all, that's not really dance. And it's called Dance After Dark. But more importantly, your junk is like right there. So what are we going to do about your junk?" And then one of the band members grabbed this huge bottle of Veuve Clicquot. I believe it's called a Jeroboam, very big, and they put it right there. And he goes, "That should about cover it." And then I thought, well, that's great, but why are you standing outside holding a Jeroboam of Veuve? Oh my God, we need dancers to hold it in front of you. It's 1:30 in the morning. So at this point, I start texting dancers, and I first texted this woman, Lisa, who I had wanted to work with, and she happened to be awake, and then I wanted to find a guy, and we were texting and texting and texting, and finally a guy showed up, and two of them showed up, surreal 1:45 in the morning, and they show up at Alan Cumming's suite in their pajamas. He hands them a drink, and they said, "Now what?" So then we started trying to construct the pose in his suite. And that's what we were working on. And then after about 5 minutes, Alan wanted to give some notes, and I was saying, no, I want it to look this way. And then eventually he said, "You know what? You're like Simon Cowell." I said, "That guy's a jerk." He said, "Exactly. Come on, let's just go shoot." It's like, okay, well, we haven't practiced yet, but all right. We go downstairs, and I wanted to do it right in front of the Carlisle Hotel because that's like a decadent and, you know, celebrity-filled place. I wanted to be very cabaret, celebrity. So I said, "Can you just practice once so I can get the lighting?" And there he is. He's like, you can tell, he's like, "Can we be done with this already? It's 2 in the morning, I'm exhausted." And that was the extent of the thing. As soon as I took that shot, a huge security guard, another, 6'9", comes in and goes, "What are y'all doing?" And there's a bunch of us there, all the band members, me, the dancers. And I was holding my camera, and Alan said, "Oh, I'm just saying goodbye to my friends." He turns to me and says, "You got to get out of here. They think that you are paparazzi." It's like, oh, okay. So I left with the dancers, and I got 2 minutes to rehearse with them. So in the middle of the street, I'm rehearsing. I'm saying, "This is what you need to do. Hold it there. We're trying to figure it out." And then I get a call from Alan. "Come back right now. We're going to do it." I run back there, and he's already half naked. I was like, wait, just keep your clothes on for a second, because I don't even know the shot yet. And I'm trying to figure out with my assistant, who's also a little tipsy, how to hold the light and not to reflect it in the thing. And I'm like, just, you got to hold it there. And Alan, in the middle of this, about to take off his pants, says, I like my light top left. Like, wow. Like, you know your stuff. Okay. So we adjusted for top left. And then I said, okay, all right, here we go. Let's go. And he just starts getting naked. I don't really have the shot yet. So I'm just holding it. I said, fine. All right, go. And he's like standing there now, ready to go. And they get into position, and I'm screaming, Alan, smirk, smirk, smirk. Hold back, guys, dip back. It's like so frantic. And 13 seconds later, I said, cut. Or I said, break. And for me, break means let's take a break and see how the shot looks. But Alan had the same reaction I had when I was photographed. He starts jumping up and said, that was amazing, let's go drink. And he gets dressed and in the elevator before I can even think, and I realized that's it. I do not get another chance. He gave me my chance, I got it or I didn't, and I just quietly sat in the elevator like I haven't even reviewed it. We went into his suite, I start looking at them. I had taken 15 pictures and I start reviewing them, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them are out of focus. 7, 8, 9, and you can see right here that I am very concerned. He's like, well, what about that one? And then I just walked away, and then number 14 was in focus. And when I showed it to Alan, he was very, very happy. And then a month later, he went on Seth Meyers and told the whole story about that shoot. Unfortunately, he told that story 6 months before the book came out, but he told the story. So that was another example of being very spontaneous and serendipity working for you. And I really believe that, like, if you know what you want, the universe seems to conspire to give it to you. And it's just over and over and over again, I've learned that the less prepared and the more I rely and count on serendipity, the more times it works out. And it's absolutely incredible. And anyway, so then what happened was, around the time I came up with the idea for Dancers After Dark, my daughter, who was 5 at the time, I believe, had to go out and shovel snow with me. And she did not want to do that at all. And she was complaining about it. But when she got out there, she looked really cute. So I went out and I took a photograph of her. And as soon as I took this photograph, she hit an arabesque. And suddenly I thought, tiny dancers among us. Of course, these kids are cute and this, that, and the other, but I didn't know anything about dancing kids. I didn't know if they were any good or not. I knew I had taken this shot, and I loved that shot, and I put that in my book for sure, but there was no story there. How am I going to tell a story? Because I don't know if these kids have any particular skill because they're so young, and I didn't know about the competition circuit or anything. I'd only ever shot adults. But truthfully, these kids are pretty spectacular, as this video will show. And what you're trying to do with tiny dancers is to show, the everyday life of kids, but then once again, to enhance it with a photograph of a dance-related theme in the middle of childhood. And then this is the image that came from that. So I have now been, for the last 2 years, concurrently, I was photographing Dancers After Dark and Dancers Among Us. And Tiny Dancers Among Us. So I would, at night, be shooting these nudes with the dancers until 4 a.m. and then celebrating after. And then at 10 a.m., a bunch of wide-eyed kids and their moms, always moms, were waiting for me to do a completely different thing. And in the midst of that, I've started to discover what this project is. And I'm just taking all kinds of recognizable, everyday moments, and the kids' talent is so unbelievable that it's really been a journey, and trying to document real moments and make it real, but yet imbue it with their skill and talent. And there's the childhood, but then there's also adolescence that goes into the book. And adolescence, and teenage years gets more complicated. And I'm trying to address the complications of growing into adulthood and what that feels like, and coming out, or maybe being ostracized in school, perhaps buying your first tampons. This was my wife's idea. First crush, sleepovers. And I'm going to end now with one story that happened very recently that says a lot more about childhood than it does about dance, but it says a lot about what we can all learn from kids. And that is this moment. I was traveling with my family a couple weeks ago to Virginia, and we pulled over for lunch somewhere in a small little Virginia town. And that little girl on the right, that's my daughter on the left, and that little girl on the right saw my daughter walk in, and she walked right up to her, and she said, "I like your shoes. You want to have a play date?" And I mean, how sweet is that? Out of nowhere. I mean, how often would I come up to you and say, "I like your shirt. Do you want to have a drink?" I mean, that we wouldn't do that unless we were trying to do that. We wouldn't do that, right? So it was really sweet. So my daughter whispered to me, "Daddy, do you think maybe we could do a photo shoot?" And I said, "Sure, let's do a photo shoot." So we went outside, and this is how they left the restaurant. They just held hands and started skipping down the street, having met 30 minutes before. And it was so beautiful. And I thought, okay, I want to get this energy. Maybe it's going to be dance. Maybe it's just a beautiful photo. Where can we have a really pretty spot? Bucolic, kind of, we're in Virginia in the country, and we found this location here. And they were just skipping through. Now, for the photographers out there, I want to give you a little behind-the-scenes view of what this location actually looks like. Looks like that. I know, ugh, right? That's the view. That's all. But if you use a long lens and you get really low and you crop, you can do that. So, that's one of my more recent Tiny Dancers. I'm working on this for another 8 months, and it's going to come out next fall, 2018, just in time for the midterm elections. And here is all of my information to follow me online. I want to show you one quick thing, because I showed you several videos, right? And these videos are professionally made. Sandy Chase did them. I love them. I've posted them online, many, many more on websites. But what I want to show you now are the two most viral, most popular videos I've ever posted. I have a large following on social media, so that's saying a lot. But these two made the rounds, and it's just funny what people choose to share and follow, right? This is the first one.
Come on, you got it.
Let me go.
You got it.
Go. That's it. That one. And then this one was such a huge deal that I had people calling me, want to use this on America's Funniest Blue, blah, blah. I mean, it was everywhere. It was multi-million views for this video. Wait for it, wait for it. Oh! Are you okay? That's it. Thank you very much.